passing it to our closing keynote. Take it away, Brett.
Hey, all right. Hey, thanks, Bree. I appreciate it. Wow, what a jam-packed day. Hi, everybody. I'm Brett Woudenberg, CEO of Mind. I just wanted to pop on for a brief moment and say thanks for hanging in there with us all day. We are so grateful that you've taken this time to be with our team in the middle of your busy world. If you were here from the start, you know we kicked off this morning with Kevin Carroll's great message reminding us about the power of play, creativity, and curiosity, and about the importance of believing in what's possible. And that energy and message is carried through every session today and every conversation. But as we wrap up, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the work that brought us here and the work that still lies ahead. This we know, the way math has been taught for generations isn't working. We've spent decades treating math as a set of steps to memorize, rewarding speed over understanding, and leaving too many students convinced that they just don't belong in math. And as a result, we've got a system that filters out thinkers instead of building them up. And that has to change, and we have to change it. Real learning, the kind that lasts, the kind that shapes confident thinkers, happens when students are given the space to struggle, to make sense of problems, and to truly see math for themselves, not as something to pass or fail, but as a way of thinking that empowers them far beyond the classroom. And this starts with all of us, but especially with all of you. You are the ones shaping what happens in classrooms. You set the tone for what's possible. You create the environments where students learn to believe in their own ability to figure things out. And that matters because what happens in math class doesn't stay in math class. It extends into how students approach challenges, how they persist, how they see themselves as capable problem solvers. And the world needs problem solvers more than ever. Here at Mind, we're fully committed to standing with you in this work, not just with tools, not just with programs, but with a shared purpose to change the way math is learned so that every student has the chance to build the thinking skills they need for their future and to solve the world's most challenging problems, which is part of our mission here at Mind. So today, I'm honored to be here with all of you, and I'm very grateful for your leadership and just want to thank you all for everything that you do each and every day investing in our kids. And now, to close out this incredible conference, I can't think of anyone better than my colleague, Nigel Nisbet. Nigel is not just an expert in math education, he's a storyteller, a researcher, an amazing musician, and a relentless advocate for helping students see and experience math differently. And as head of our content creation at Mind, he has dedicated his career to transforming the way students learn by connecting abstract concepts to the real world in ways that spark curiosity, joy, and deep understanding. And if you've read any of Nigel's work or seen him speak, you know he has a unique way of making math come alive. And it's not just his spectacular British accent, although I've always been jealous of that, Nigel, but he reminds us that math isn't something to be feared, it's something to be explored and experienced, to be played with and truly understood. So with that, thank you for giving me a moment to speak to you all. And I want to pass the mic over to Nigel. And so please join me in welcoming Nigel. Nigel, take it away.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you very, very much indeed. I really appreciate that. Awesome. All right, so we're going to dive in, and thank you everybody who's been here all day. It's been fantastic and wonderful. So we're going to dive in and end by looking at a topic that hopefully kind of pulls a lot of these threads together. We're going to connect play, we're going to connect doing, we're going to connect conceptual understanding, and we're going to talk about it through this lens of experience and this notion of the power of experience. And by that, I don't mean necessarily people who have experience. It's that power of experience says, this notion, and we'll dig into what that means and what that looks like in a minute. So, but I'm going to start, and Brett mentioned this briefly, and I think it sort of helps to set up a little bit of the narrative here. I'm going to start by my own experience. It's obviously sharing one's personal story and an angle on things helps to shape possibly some of the reasons why you're doing certain things. And I'm going to start with something that people are maybe a little bit familiar with, but maybe don't know too many details about. But like Brett said, my journey into education was not particularly typical. Not that long ago, well, sort of 25 to 30 years ago, I was doing something very, very different. So this is 1998. This was my band on television in the UK, right before we had a top 20 hit. And in fact, I was looking here, looking up Electricity, and you can see, you know, sort of top 20 hardest working band in Britain in the 90s, 180 shows in 1998. Did all sorts of cool stuff, which was fantastic. And then by 2001, we were here in the US, signed to Arista Records, had some songs in movies, and it was all absolutely fantastic, wonderful, brilliant experience. Had about a decade of that. And then in the early 2000s, Napster happened. The music industry kind of imploded from within. And in 2003, I found myself here at Van Nuys High School in front of a classroom full of kids. I'm in front of actually 5 classrooms of kids who were doing Algebra 1A1, which was basically the first half of Algebra 1 broken into 2 bits, spread across a year for kids who had never passed anything in high school. And it was a, you know, bit of a shock, as you can imagine. I'd had a little bit of, a tiny little bit of teaching experience prior to that, but really not a whole lot. And a lot of what I'll be sharing today is kind of the process, you know, having been dumped into this deep end, the process that I went through to kind of figure out, okay, how do I make this work, led me on a journey of discovery about learning, about education, about what it's like to guide learning. And we're going to talk about some of that today and kind of dig into some of the aspects, a lot of which will basically be digging into things that I got wrong. Right? Basically, what were the mistakes that I made? What were the misconceptions that I had that turned out to be drastically and utterly wrong? And there's almost no bigger misconception that I had than was my vision of learning my vision of what teaching looked like in the beginning. And some of you may be familiar with this image. I've used it in the past quite a lot, but this is kind of what I thought teaching would be about, right? Based, I guess, very much upon my own experience from school. This is a beautiful picture. I love it. This was drawn in France in 1910, and it's what they thought school would look like en l'an 2000, in the year 2000. And you can see here the teacher and the books are the font of all of the knowledge, and they're getting put into this machine where it's getting ground up and then piped directly to each of these kids, probably in some perfect personalized learning path. And this was very much my vision of learning, right? I kind of thought, okay, I know mathematics. I have the degree in pure mathematics before becoming, starting a band. And I thought, right, okay, I am the font of knowledge here. I need to kind of teach these kids and help them to figure out what's going on. Well, actually tell them what to do. So what I want to think about first, and I can see the chat. Let me just make sure I have this up. Yeah, fantastic. So first question is very, very simple. What is wrong with this picture from a learning perspective? Just take a little look, dig in here, look at what's happening here, and just what is wrong with this as a vision of learning? And you can just type stuff in the chat, and we'll see what we think. We'll be doing quite a bit of this kind of sharing, so do not be afraid to put stuff in, and let's see what we get here. Okay, fantastic. Love it. All right, great. Oh my gosh, there's so much I can barely keep up. But no engagement, passive, absolutely. Receiving, not doing. No one is looking at one another. No community. Love it. Teachers and students are separate. Yeah, the kids are not smiling. They are not. No engagement. Teacher feeding the students. Absolutely. It's very much this notion that, yeah, the teacher's not particularly engaged either. Absolutely. And it's a concept here that basically learning is this one-way flow of information, right? That somehow, as a teacher, what you have to do is basically just kind of sort of be the source on the font of this and all this is going to happen. I noticed that nobody else, people did say the kids weren't smiling. Nobody actually mentioned here there are actually no girls in the class, which seems like yes, homogeneous groups, yes. Small bit of a misconception here from 1910, but anyway, so this picture kind of exemplifies kind of what I went into this like, and obviously from that you can only go up. So this kind of, I want to sort of put a three-phase process that I went through that we'll sort of dig into a bit. So in the beginning, I'm thinking, okay, kids just need to hear it, right? They need to basically, I'll tell them how to do things. And I realized before too long that, okay, that doesn't work so well. I need to kind of show them some stuff. So now, and we'll take a look at this in a minute. And then eventually, maybe once I've told you how to do everything, once I've shown you how to do everything, maybe I'll just let the reins off a little bit and the kids can actually try and do something, right? And as a teacher in the beginning, I was very reluctant to get to this stage. I do a whole lot of talking, a whole lot of showing and sort of demonstrating what was going on, and then give the kids a little bit of time to try and do stuff by themselves. And a major piece of obviously what I went through, discovered, learned, found the hard way, and we'll talk about that too, is that, of course, I had the process completely backwards. What needs to happen is that the do it bit needs to come up front. And then maybe we can see and break it down, and then we can talk about it in more detail. But we just need to completely reverse that flow. And we're going to sort of, dig into this in a little way. So first of all, we're going to think about this from the perspective of a learner. And then a little bit later on, we're going to think about it from a completely different perspective that I don't think gets enough airtime. So, but we're going to think about this from the learner first of all. And let's just sort of go back to how I was doing it and think about that process, and we'll see where that gets us. So, and I'm going to pick a particular piece of mathematics, and we're going to focus on that today and just kind of imagine, in the beginning, imagine you're in a classroom, imagine that sort of a teacher is kind of basically doing this to you, and let's just see what happens with this piece of math. So we're going to talk about angles. So acute angles are less than 90 degrees. Right angles are exactly 90 degrees. Obtuse angles are greater than 90 but less than 180. Reflex angles are greater than 180 but less than 360. We can use lowercase Greek letters, for example, theta or x, or we use three uppercase letters, for example, BAC. Angles around a point add up to 360, angles around a point, etc., etc., etc. As you can imagine, not a whole lot of learning going on, but it's important to point out nothing on this page is inaccurate. Everything on this page is perfectly accurate, but as a learning experience, it's a little bit limited. So maybe the answer then, and I did actually see this happening in a classroom, believe it or not, a couple of months ago. Maybe my accent, I know Brett likes it, but maybe my accent is the problem here. So maybe what we need to do, if we get Snoop Dogg to read this particular piece of text, right?
Acute angles are less than 90 degrees. Right angles are exactly 90 degrees. Obtuse angles are greater than 90 degrees.
Now that solves all the problems, right? So suddenly we're done, right? Snoop Dogg reading this. I actually walked into a classroom and I kid you not, I saw this happening. This was somebody's idea of how to use AI to improve instruction, was basically, okay, my teacher voice isn't good enough. We'll get Snoop Dogg to read it. That's going to make this all that much better. No, it's not. The point is nothing has changed. And this kind of stuff drives me nuts, which is this idea that somehow, oh, we're going to use technology to do exactly what we were always doing, but somehow that's going to make it better. It doesn't. We've got to think, how can we use technology to radically change the game? So I thought you get a kick out of that. That definitely, I thought it was interesting when I actually saw this. It was actually the high school that I'm hoping my son will go to next year. And even after I went to visit the school and saw that, I'm still like, okay, I think it'll be okay. But yeah, so Snoop Dogg reading this is not going to make it any better. So then, after I kind of also realized that and realized that me saying it is not good enough, obviously we can move up a gear. We can go, okay, well, let's start using a lot more visuals, which is definitely better. And I used a lot when I was teaching, and I've loved it ever since. It's fantastic. If you have never seen GeoGebra, it's awesome. It allows you to build stuff like this. It's very cool. It's free as well. It's a brilliant tool. So, hey, here is an acute angle, right? You can see I can change it. Angles are a way of measuring this thing. And these are acute angles. This is 30 degrees, 60 degrees, etc. And then we get this, which is 90 degrees. And then, okay, obtuse angles are this stuff that's bigger than 90, but less than 180, which is a straight line. And then there's this stuff down here. I can't even remember what the word was for that angle. I don't think I've ever used it in my life. It's not that important. The name is not the important thing. Angles are a way of measuring these cool things. So this is great. This is definitely better, and I would use a lot of this stuff. But it's still, just like that picture from the French lithograph from 1910, it's me doing all the work. I was the one who built all these things. I was the one who made all these tools. I have a whole page on GeoGebra of all these things that I made for the classroom. They're lovely. They're wonderful. I learned so much. The kids, not so much. So, so then obviously we know that the most effective sort of part of this is doing this. So if you have phones, now is a good time to get your phone out and ready, because you can actually do some doing. There's going to be a lot of active engagement here, and we're going to do some doing. So we're going to look at what does it feel like from a student perspective to just do this stuff. Right. So, and they're actually, we're going to play some STMath. If you hadn't guessed, that's kind of what's coming. Right. And as you're going through and playing it, again, think about not just the mathematics that you're kind of engaging with, but what it feels like as a learner. What are the characteristics that make this experience kind of work? Okay, so let's leave this. So you can either scan the QR code or type in the bit.ly link, and you should get something that looks, once my screen eventually loads, you should get something that looks a little bit like this. I'm going to do it too, just to make sure that it works, because fingers crossed it does. And then, hey, just start messing with it and see what you do. And I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Oh, thank you, Jenna. Yeah, and Jenna actually put the code in the chat as well. So if you want to play it on your computer or whatever, just click the link that's in the chat right now. And then let's just start playing through the puzzles. So, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to do this. Great. Okay, there we go. I see people making that. This, of course, is where it would be so much more fun to walk around the room and hear the dings and hear the doinks and hear all the noises of kids learning. But let's just play some games for a minute. Oh, hopefully this works okay on phones. Oh, I'm actually seeing a bit of an issue where on the phone, the protractor does not seem to land where it's supposed to.
It's working on my phone, Nigel.
There you go. Good. Then it's just my phone that it's not working on. Then that's okay. All right, good. Well, as long as it's working for you guys, then that's fine. Okay, well, hopefully it is working. Anybody else having an issue where the protractor is not quite laying correctly on the angle? Yeah, that's STMath not designed for phones, so that's why it's a little funky, but hopefully you can still figure it out. If you're using this on a computer, you'll see that it all lines up great. That is interesting. Hopefully we can still. So in that case, if you do want to then click on the link in the chat and use it on a computer, then maybe kind of work through it with that. What I'll do is I will just play along while everyone's kind of doing this. So if for some reason you are having issues on the phone, this is what should be happening. This thing should land nicely right here, and you should be able to read off the angle very carefully and kind of mess with it. And I'm going to intentionally get a couple of things wrong right here. Gigi did not make it across the screen. So yeah, for some reason on my phone, the protractor is sort of landing about here, which is a little odd, but c'est la vie. As you're going through this, just think about what are the critical components of this as a learning experience, apart from the protractor not fitting correctly over the top of the angle. I would say pay really close attention to the details here, because there's a lot of interesting things happening. Okay, thank you, Alicia. Yep, great point there. Absolutely. And what Alicia is talking about is, I think, about to happen on my version here, where we've got a bunch where it's kind of all lined up like this. And then after a certain number of puzzles, suddenly it changes, which if you're on your phone is going to be problematic. Oh my gosh, how many puzzles did I put in here? Well, I'm glad we got lots of time because I put a lot of puzzles in here. There we go. Actually ended up putting this together at about 10 o'clock last night, so I might have been a little bit tired at that point. But okay, so this is what Alicia's talking about. You'll notice that suddenly now the protractor has to be moved. So excellent. Okay, anybody finished? Let me see if anybody finished all of the puzzles. Maybe I just want to see how we're doing on time. Oops. No, okay. Looks like people are still working through these. That's great. And that, okay, all right, Alicia on fire. Yep, absolutely. There's more transitions to come. So, yep, absolutely. There's some really interesting subtleties here. And thank you, April. Awesome. Because eventually, so for anybody who did have difficulty, puzzle 18, I can calculate the difference on the, okay, very nice. So that's cool. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that, well, we'll talk about this in a minute. So let me just, I'll just work through some of these just in case anybody had difficulty doing this, which again, the whole point is that it'd be so much better if you were able to do it. But if for some reason you weren't able to, at least you can kind of at least get some idea of what everyone's doing here. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You could do all sorts of ways of thinking about this. Oops, don't think it's 200. Okay, and maybe if you once you're done, maybe just put something in the chat to let us know. And okay, awesome. Okay, excellent. Lots of cool stuff. Okay, so what I want you to do is keep playing if you're playing. For those that have finished, what were the critical aspects of this learning experience? We've mentioned some of them that are kind of about the leveling, but what else? What else is critical to this as a learning experience? Imagine if you were, say, in 3rd or 4th grade. I guess 4th grade is probably where you start doing this. What are some of the critical components of this? And what makes this very different from, say, listening to Snoop Dogg telling you about angles or something like that? Like, what are the key aspects of this as a learning experience that's separated from the other methods that we were looking at? Okay, excellent. I'm going to give a little bit of time for people to come up with some thoughts here, because this is definitely a okay, have to make sense of where the angle starts and ends. Love it. Students are doing, and we'll start to see the differences. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Both picture and value, fantastic. So yeah, let's just keep seeing what do people have as what was critical here. Okay, learning by doing, building our understanding. Absolutely, it's interactive. Yes, very much so. Sense of it. Okay. What Mary said here is really interesting. Students can play around with the protractor without being judged. Let's hold on to that thought, because that is going to be extremely important later on. This is a very, very big deal. Absolutely. Using tools. Yep. Absolutely. All these things are spot on. Let's keep going and see what other thoughts people have. Hands-on practice with a protractor, knowing which numbers to read. Yeah, absolutely. Based on, okay, absolutely. A lot of experience with angles, seeing angle degree, making sense. Again, making sense. A really, really, really simple phrase. Frustrated in the beginning because I didn't know what to do. Love it. That's awesome. That's fantastic. That is great. And we will talk about that too. So this is awesome. I'm loving what I'm getting here. So trial and error, awesome. Yes, critical thinking. Let's see what else have we got here, but this is good. What we've got here is fabulous stuff. So let's just see if we get a few more interesting thoughts, but there's tons of great stuff to work from here and talk about this. So, okay, I think we've got maybe, if anyone else has any thoughts about, what sort of makes this key, don't need any vocabulary to do the math. Oh yes, so happy that we got that thought out there, because again, that is such a big deal. So then felt validated. I was trying to do more complicated stuff in the beginning. Yep, obviously. Okay, cool. So lots of great thoughts there. Notice pretty much everything that you said, all of the discussion here about what makes this critical as a learning experience. None of that applies to being told about how to do something. Like, none of that applies, right? Now, the one thing that also doesn't apply, of course, is that you don't get frustrated. But getting frustrated is such a critical part of this process. So this is really, really key what we've got here. There's a lot of good stuff. And we're going to sort of think about this and dig into it a little bit. And then we're going to sort of take a little bit of a right angle to it, and that's not meant to be a pun, but it kind of is. We're going to take a right angle to it and look at this in a very, very different way. So we're thinking about this from the student perspective, and we're thinking, okay, students are doing this, right? This is key. And I love the fact that we spoke about the fact that, okay, there's no language involved to getting them started here, which is really, really, really important. One of the reasons why so often we feel that we have to do so much telling up front is that it's the only tools we have for students to actually do anything are tools that have language embedded in them. Well, they can't just do it. right? Which is where so much of this sort of obsession with telling comes from, is that, well, if all we have then is a book with questions in it, they can't really do much of that until we've sort of told them how to do stuff. Obviously, STMath is one of the things that allows us to flip this on its head and put the do it bit at the beginning because there is no language barrier. Trial and error, using tools, hands-on practice. There's so much that comes out from actually experiencing this that you don't get from somebody else telling you. Somebody else is going to have their own experience, their own sort of thoughts about how something works. You discover for yourself the key things for you that make this work, right? And this is great. This is, you know, a powerful thing. We're very aware of this. And I think most people here have sort of, you know, seen either myself or somebody else talk a little bit about the neuroscience behind what we're doing here. And with STMath, primarily, we're able to get kids into this perception action schema building, right? We're able to get them to do that, the learning by doing piece. And we're able to get them to do that without a language barrier. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And then you've also probably heard us talk a lot about, well, once we can do that, we really then need to start driving student discourse. And this is where things can get a little bit tricky, because certainly when I'm thinking back to my own teaching experience, like, yeah, I realized that I kind of needed to do this. And what we've just engaged with is a very typical professional learning type moment, right? Where we've engaged with something as a learner. And that's great. That's wonderful. We do this a lot, where we go to professional learning, we engage with something as a learner, and we go, well, that's cool. That's great. I'm now going to take this back to my classroom. And we don't, I think, give enough thought as to quite what this means for teachers in terms of trying to do this type of process. Because let's imagine, for example, you're like, you know, you go to some professional learning and someone's talking about open-ended tasks and using student discourse to drive instruction and students being able to do things first before you teaching them how to do it. And then your class looks a bit like this, right? Which was my experience back in the day. And I did this, I tried this, and it was terrible because I had absolutely no idea of how to do it. And one of the other major characteristics of the process that we kind of just went through, and I'm just trying to see here. Oh, yes, it was the one. Thank you, somebody. Love this. Without being judged. Students were able to play with the protractor without being judged. They were also able to make mistakes without being judged. It's a safe space for that exploration and that play to occur in. Now imagine you're a teacher, you're going back to your classroom, and you're thinking, I am going to try this new teaching methodology out with my class. And unfortunately, you don't have the luxury of being able to make mistakes easily. You don't necessarily have tools to help you do this piece very effectively. And one of the things that I found is that I would sort of take ideas back to my classroom. I would try them. They wouldn't work very well. And it was really difficult then to keep trying to do them, right? It's hard when things are such a struggle to do that. And this kind of brings me to, I guess, sort of this difference between when we're having kids do stuff. There's kind of, you know, we don't really want uncontrolled chaos. We want some sort of like creative messiness. And one of the things that, you know, we've been involved with here at Mind for a long time is how can we make tools that not only are going to help students learn by doing in the way that we kind of experienced, but also help teachers move what could be uncontrolled chaos into a kind of creative messiness. And we've seen STMath is a tool for that, but it's not the only piece of what we've kind of got going on. So I've been at Mind now for 15 years. And in that time, there've been two major sort of components to the stuff that I've done. One of which is building games, which hopefully will eventually load here. So here's a game that I was involved in building a long time ago called Parabola Balloons, which you may be familiar. We use it, I think, in 7th and 8th grade, maybe a little bit lower for the linear stuff. So, but this was, you know, a fun thing to build, and certainly I've loved building games with Gigi, and doing all this kind of stuff has been great. But the other big component of what I've been involved with while I've been at Mind is not just building games and thinking about how we can sort of assist students directly getting to the math. It's also thinking about how can we build tools for the classroom that actually help teachers experience those moments of teaching, experience what does academic discourse feel like. We've done a lot of R&D into, we used to call it the classroom of the future. We've called it all sorts of different things at different times. And the output of a lot of that R&D is actually going to be coming out not that long from now, and it will be InsightMath. But even before we get to InsightMath, we've got something that all users of STMath currently have, which is really a sort of tool for teachers to actually help you create academic discourse in the classroom with a kind of supportive mechanism. And I think most people here are probably familiar with puzzle talks. If you, again, I don't know about, you can use the QR code here, it'll take you to a page. But what I really want to just kind of dive into here is talking about what this means, how this works, and how puzzle talks are kind of a tool to help teachers experience what teaching like this can feel like, right? Like, it doesn't have to be scary to get kids to talk about stuff. So I'm going to actually type in angles again here and go down to 4th grade. And I think we might want to put that second link in the chat. If anybody else wants to go here, you can actually, again, rather than me showing you and talking to you about this, you can actually do this yourself. You can click on the Puzzle Talks link. You have a link to this inside your STMath thing, but you can just go use this one for now as a way of doing this. And I'm going to start this puzzle talk. And one of the key things about puzzle talks is they are a way of getting your kids talking. And for anybody here who's done one of these, oh, I guess our system is everybody on it at the same time. For some reason, it's either that or our internet here has gotten very slow suddenly. Okay, well, puzzle talk that I did have. Do I have it open? It's not loading very quickly either. Okay, well, not to worry. We'll get there in the end, hopefully. So I was hoping to be able to work through this puzzle talk. Has anybody else got the puzzle talk open, the one with the angles and the protractor? Yeah, so it's working for everybody else. It's just not working for me. Okay, that's fine. That's totally okay. But what you can see is some of the same characteristics. We played a long sequence of puzzles, but built into this puzzle talk are some of the same characteristics that, okay, there we go. Finally, it works. Here we go. We're going to see. So this chance for students to explore in a safe place, but also a chance for teachers to guide the students through this process with a tool, this puzzle talk, that is really easy to use. So I'm going to dive into some of the key puzzles here, because there's some things that we didn't see earlier. So, okay, the first puzzle is nice and simple. They're just measuring an angle, which is great. And you can see here, okay, it's 60 degrees. You might recognize this was one of the ones that we did earlier. And all of our puzzle talks are arranged in a very, very similar way. They're going to have 4 puzzles that kind of progress in difficulty, sort of up to somewhere quite challenging. And then they're going to have a bonus puzzle that maybe does something a little bit different. So the teacher, as a teacher, you don't have to go and find which puzzles to put in a sequence. They're here, they're done. We've also seen that these are really good for getting kids and driving them to think about stuff and talk about stuff. So getting kids to actually walking into a classroom, getting kids to talk about solving these puzzles is really easy. Kids love to talk about what they're doing, which is cool. So here you can see we've got a slightly different situation again in the second puzzle. And of course, we got the teacher notes right here, talking about specifically what questions you might ask, what you might be looking for with students as they're going through these specific puzzles, which is cool. So this is a chance for teachers to experience what does it feel like to engage kids in academic discourse. And it's really easy to do. And if anybody has used these and wants to put any of their experiences in the chat about using puzzle talks in the class, please feel free to do so. So you can see we're kind of getting more complex now. We're actually measuring some really interesting angles. We can do it in probably all sorts of different ways. Here we go. I'm going to measure it like this. Some of you may choose to measure it in all sorts of different ways, which is fine. Kids will also choose to measure it in different ways. They might start seeing it as differences and all sorts of different ways of looking at this. And now notice we're being asked to measure more than one angle on the same diagram, which is cool. Gosh, I think we even get asked to measure the third one as well. There we go. That's 25 degrees. So again, nice sequence of stuff. Yes. So that, Alicia, that's kind of the point I'm sort of hoping to kind of make here. It is easy for people to get afraid of you know, we want creative messiness, but oh my gosh, I have been personally in the situation where it was not creative messiness, it was uncontrolled chaos, right? And that is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. You don't want your class to become uncontrolled chaos, because there are consequences as a teacher for that. The kids get out of control, it gets, chaotic. You want creative messiness, and these are tools absolutely to help teachers drive creative messiness as opposed to uncontrolled chaos. InsightMath is another sort of example of a lot of the design thinking behind it is how can we provide something that helps teachers engage kids in creative messiness rather than uncontrolled chaos, but still allows for the students to have that doing it first kind of opportunity. And you can see here then the fourth puzzle, I think we get back to, we do eventually get back to, when my system will update, we get back to the multiple choice thing. So we're kind of getting to the point where we're asking kids quicker and quicker questions. But yeah, this is definitely a key idea here. Puzzle talks are a tool for teachers as much as they are a tool for students, right? As much as they are a thing to drive students' academic discourse, they're also a tool for teachers to be able to experience what it feels like to create that in their classroom. And, it just makes it so much easier to get kids into that kind of creative space when you have tools like this to help you do that, okay? Right, I'm going to jump out of this for a second and come back to where we were. Okay, fantastic. Okay, all of which brings me to the third thing that I've done a lot of at Mind, and again, some of you may have read these, is I've written a lot of stuff and do a lot of talking about things. And one of the recent blogs that I had was talking about my daughter, and it sort of grew out of a lot of things. And I'm going to kind of close with this thought, because this really speaks to the importance of what we're doing and why we're doing it. What we're doing, and I don't by we, I don't mean us at Mind, I mean all of us, people who are here as educators, who especially those who are in the classroom working with children directly and those who support that. What we're doing is unbelievably important. The world has changed in very, very significant ways. And we need creative thinkers. We need creative problem solvers now more than ever. And I wrote a blog that kind of touched upon that, talking about my daughter, who is now 11, and how she doesn't need the same math education that my mother had. And there are sort of really specific reasons for that. And again, some of you may have seen this sort of piece, but I think it's kind of worth digging into again if you're not familiar with it. So this is a picture from the 1940s, and you can see here it says computing division, computing section. So maybe just type in the chat, where are the computers in this room? Where do you see the computers? The people. Yes, they are the computers. Absolutely. I was doing a presentation, I think in NCSM in Seattle many years ago, and a woman leapt out of her seat and said, my mother was a computer, which is an interesting turn of phrase, but absolutely 100% correct for this time period. So this is the 40s. These are human computers. You may very well be aware, of course, of the movie Hidden Figures. I'm sure pretty much everybody here probably has seen this film. It is a math film. It's a great film. There's not that many math films to start with, and good ones are very hard to come by. So Hidden Figures, awesome movie, and it shows how not that long ago, like within my lifetime, certainly, I was born right before we landed on the moon. Human computers were a major part and component of helping us get to the moon. And in the blog, I'm told my mother was not a human computer, I hasten to add, but she was an office manager, secretary, as they were called back in the sort of 60s and 50s. And she had to use mathematics on a daily basis. She had to be good at doing math procedures because quite literally she needed to do them to order supplies and calculate things. And there was just incredible value in being able to do mathematical procedures quickly and accurately. And one of the things that I came across was a memo by NASA. And this is when NASA, this is before it even became the space agency. This is from 1942 when it was called NASA with a C. And I always forget what the acronym is for. It's something like National Aeronautical something or other, and I keep meaning to look it up again because I did once upon a time know it, and of course I keep forgetting, and I keep forgetting to look it up, which kind of says a lot about the state of my mind. But this is going back a while, 1942, and they said the volume of work often necessitates computers, as in people, who can perform the routine machine operations with great speed, but who need not have much logical insight into what the results should be. So just let that phrase sink in for a minute, because it is really, oh, there you go. National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. Thank you. There it is. I will, of course, forget it again instantly, but that is great. But yeah, just let that phrase sink in. Who need not have much logical insight into what the results should be. This was basically the idea that we need, coming out of our education system, a lot of people who can do math really, 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 really fast, but don't actually have to understand how it works. What I want to know is, maybe again, you could put into the chat, how many people today are paid to do mathematical procedures really, really, really quickly, but don't need to understand how they work? How many people are paid to do that today? See what kind of answers we get. Very few. Okay. Zero. Yes, I think zero is probably, very few is a good answer. I think zero is probably the better one. So yeah, so nobody is actually paid anymore to do mathematical procedures. This notion that basically we need an education system that is creating people who can do things with great speed but don't have to understand what the results should be is no longer a thing. It's not there anymore. It's gone. And I have a whole other thing, which I'm not going to do today, but talking about AI, because now AI can even solve all word problems, for example. So just being good at solving sort of fake word problems is actually not much of a useful skill either. So we really do need to think about, so what are the critical skills that kids need to learn in a mathematical context today in school? So let's just kind of, I've got a couple of slides that wrap after this. So just thinking about that for a moment, if this isn't what's needed anymore, what is needed? What does math class have to produce? What do we need kids to come out of math class being able to do? Because this is definitely not it anymore. So just take a second, think about what are the characteristics that we need for students coming out of math class today? Thank you very much, Nina. Excellent. Shakisa, yeah, thank you. What else have we got? Curious, love it. Yes, absolutely. Which sounds remarkably like Kevin's talk this morning, which I thought was wonderful. And yeah, this is okay. Problem solving, thinking deeply, thinking creatively, and problem solving. See a lot of problem solving happening here. Any other thoughts? What have got here? Children bombard, process and analyze. Yeah, very, very, very important. This notion of being able to kind of sift through things. Fearless. Ooh, nice. Yes. Flexibility in thought, fun, engaging, and risk-taking. Exploring, playing. Yes, absolutely. Creatively. Okay. Gosh, lots of great stuff. Time to struggle and persevere. That's such a key idea. As a teacher, you have to figure out ways of providing that time. Absolutely. Logic. Yep. Absolutely. 100%. Lovely. Wonderful. So if these are the experience, or if this is the mindset we need kids to come out of math class with, obviously the way that that mathematics class is conducted is going to have a huge impact on the way that they come out of that class. And that's really the whole point of this shift. Moving, and I'm going to just kind of jump backwards to some slides for a second. And I know this is probably not the super professional way of doing it. I should have thought about this better and brought them in. But if this was the typical way of doing things, there is a reason that we need to do this now. When kids are given this chance to do things early, that's what creates or builds for them this notion of curiosity. They're being asked to do things where they explicitly don't necessarily know how to do them. That builds curiosity. It automatically builds this kind of thinking of like, I don't know how to do that. I wonder how I can figure it out. I wonder what I need to do. So this process, and for me, this was a painful shift, actually going from doing this, and I think I did these first two bits pretty effectively. I thought, damn, I'm really good at telling people how to do stuff and maybe drawing stuff on the board. I actually started teaching with chalkboards, so I would come out of my classroom just covered in chalk because I was doing way too much work. But I realized that this wasn't cutting it. This was not creating the mathematical learning experience that kids needed. They needed to be doing this first. And a lot of what drew me to mind and then led me to build games and build everything we've been doing with STMath is figuring out how it's so important that kids are actually engaged in this process first. How can we, A, with STMath, provide learning experiences for students that give them the chance to do that? And then B, how can we provide tools to teachers that help them create learning experiences for kids to do that? Because those two things are so critical. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple of thoughts for you. I think I might be finishing a couple of minutes early, which for those of you who see me present or talk on a regular basis, may be something of a record. So don't get too used to it. I promise I will overrun again in the near future. But okay, couple of last little thoughts. If this was how we thought about teaching math, and if this was the way that we thought about it, this idea we need to do it like a machine, what we really need to do now for our students is they need to be able to build the machines. They need to be able to create. So this is the new way that we have to engage students in doing everything. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for being here today. We're Mind Education, obviously. I'm sure you're very familiar with who we are. And our mission is to ensure that all students are mathematically equipped to solve the world's most challenging problems. This is the vision that drives us, this trying to figure out how we can make this happen by, as I said, building tools for students and building tools for teachers that help to elevate this mission. I guess if there's any questions, we might have a minute to do something, but I'm also happy to pass it back. Bree, am I passing it back to you and you can kind of
Yeah, but I'm happy we got like 5 minutes if anyone has any questions. So